In a past life, my sister Linda got adopted by a wealthy family, while I was taken in by a janitorial worker. Turns out, the rich family was full of drama, parents were cold, and the brother was a bully, so Linda ended up penniless. My adoptive family was harmonious. Even one of the rich family's sons fell in love with me. It was like a soap opera. Linda ended up killing me in resentment, and we both got reborn to the day we were adopted. This time, she ran straight into the arms of the janitor. Sis, now it's my turn to be the star of the show. Little did she know, to be the main character, it takes more than just birthright. Linda and I were back on adoption day at the orphanage. In the office stood two families. One family was all dressed to the nines. The man in a sharp suit, the woman decked out in jewelry. Their only son, Ken, wore a high school uniform paired with globally limited edition sneakers. This was the most prominent family in New York. Ken's dad, Matt, was a business tycoon whose companies paid the most taxes in the city. Ken's mom, Kate, was a socialite always seen at auctions and charity events, mingling with A-listers. Ken was known as the rich kid. The other family standing next to them looked quite shabby. Their hands bore marks of hard labor. They wore their best clothes, but sweat stains were still visible. According to the director, the couple worked at a school in New York, dad as a helper and mom as a cleaner. In the last life, Linda didn't hesitate to choose Ken's family, but now, she almost raced towards the janitor to avoid being left behind. Mom, take me. I want to be your daughter. From now on, I'm Linda. Amid Linda's joy, I walked over to Ken's family. Just like that, choice is made. We were adopted by our respective families. As we left the orphanage, I overheard the director muttering, "Strange, Linda always favored the wealthy ones, wouldn't even look at average people. But this time, real wealth came, and she didn't choose." The director didn't understand, but I did. In the past life, Linda schemed to be adopted by the wealthy family, becoming Linda. She thought she was destined for a princess-like life, not to mention having Ken as a brother. In romance novels, rich guys and adopted sisters always had chemistry living under the same roof. But Linda didn't expect Ken to despise her. "I hate gold diggers. Don't think I can't see through you. You're just after our money." At home, Ken tormented Linda. At school, he and his cronies bullied her. Ken's parents knew, but only gave half-hearted scoldings. They didn't care for Linda. They adopted her because a fortune teller told Matt adopting a daughter would bring him a prosperous decade. Naturally, Matt and Kate had a soft spot for their son. While Ken bullied Linda, he was extremely kind to me. He saw me on a scholarship, topping classes, studying hard by day, and helping mom clean by night. Lillian, this girl is something. Just like a soap opera, the aloof rich kid fell for poor little me. When Ken's parents passed and it was time to share the inheritance, Ken, with his lawyer squad, left Linda with nothing, casting her out empty-handed. A few months later, Ken married me. He even vowed at the wedding, "Lillian, what's mine is yours." Sadly, I never got to enjoy Ken's fortune. Linda, driven to madness, ran me over in despair days later. Back in this life, Linda chose the poorer family without hesitation. No riches, but no scheming either, enjoying wholehearted love from parents, growing up happy. Winning a fairytale wedding was her endgame. She laughed, "Sis, this time, I'm the main character." Linda wasn't wrong. Ken's bullying came even earlier. At school, my head was dunked in water while boys laughed. Before suffocating, someone yanked me up, Ken, smiling. "Want my family's money?" "Sure, drink the toilet water. Every sip earns you 10 grand. Deal." His followers cheered. I looked at Ken. This person, who once lovingly declared his feelings, now bullied me ruthlessly. Yet, Ken wasn't looking at me. He stared past me. I knew Linda was bending over, mopping the floor behind me. Wasn't that Linda? Why was she still cleaning? A crony informed Ken, "Linda's mom is the school janitor. She helps with cleaning after classes." Ken seemed shocked, then a bit concerned. He called to Linda, "Hey, it's freezing, why clean?" "No one's checking anyway." Linda stood up, hair down, defiant expression on her face. Shaking her head, she replied, "I can't. If anyone checks and finds it dirty, mom's pay gets cut by $100. I know 100 means nothing to you, but it's my week's food money." Finishing, Linda bent again to clean. Her scheme was evident. She chose to clean near Ken deliberately. With her hair an angle, she looked her best, but Ken fell for it. Sure enough, Ken went over, pulled Linda up, took her cloth, tossing it to his lackeys. "All of you, clean the rest." Seeing Linda's red hands, he thought and draped his jacket over her. "How will you get home?" "Bike. In this cold." "No way. Wait downstairs, my driver will take you." Linda left, shielded by Ken. While leaving, she shot a mocking look back at me. Minutes later, they all dispersed. I was alone by the sink. Struggling to my feet, I wiped the dripping water off with my sleeve. Use this, a soft voice said behind. I turned to see it was Betty from our class. She was a quiet girl, studied hard, wore long sleeves year-round. She also helped Linda when she got bullied last time, giving her a towel, urging her to expose Ken's bullying. Linda knocked her hand away. What do you know? That's my brother. Back then, Linda was still dreaming about making Ken like her. After a while, Betty stopped bothering with her and kept to herself, moving around in silence. Then, just before graduation, Betty committed suicide. That's when we learned her family was extremely poor. Her grandma had been bedridden for years. Her dad was a gambler. He not only abused her, but also planned to sell her off to cover his debts. Right now, she's standing next to me, holding a clean towel. I paused for a moment, then took it. She didn't say much, just turned and left. She probably figured that there wasn't much to say to a rich girl like me. Right before she disappeared, I suddenly spoke up. Betty. Her steps came to a halt. I scratched my head and said, I'm new here and get lost easily. Where's the cafeteria? Can you show me the way? The cafeteria table had 4 dishes and a soup laid out. Braised pork ribs, steamed egg with meat, cola chicken wings, stir-fried greens, and clam wintermelon soup. No surprise it's the best high school in New York. Everyone talks about how great the cafeteria food is. I scratched my head again. Oops. I might have ordered too much. It would be a shame to waste it. You haven't had dinner, right? Wanna join me? Betty stayed silent for a bit, then finally picked up the chopsticks and started eating slowly. I looked at her wrist peeking out from her school uniform sleeve. It was so thin and fragile. Girls like Betty are the ones who truly need help, but they're not pretty, and they don't complain. So they just end up being the overlooked weeds in the memory of youth, not even qualifying as a drama lead. In this lifetime, I'm not only going to save myself, but also save her. Firming up my mind, I spoke up. Geez, conic sections are so hard. I can't understand a thing. Betty, you're good at studying. How about tutoring me? Betty looked shocked, as if thinking, are we even that close? While chewing on a piece of braised pork, I didn't give her any chance to refuse. I wrapped an arm around Betty's shoulder and cheerfully said, that's settled then. I'll pay for the tutoring. I handed some of my living expenses to Betty, calling it advance payment for tutoring. She looked at the 100 red bills in the envelope, too shocked to speak. Whether in my past life or this one, Ken's family never skimped on basic living expenses and allowances for me as an adopted daughter. But what's pocket change for Ken, given to Betty, was enough to buy medicine for her grandma and cover some hospital bills. She could even rent a small place off campus, away from her abusive father. After setting up our tutoring session for the next day, I went home. The luxurious villa was empty. Matt was out for business engagements, and Kate was at a beauty salon. Ken was probably having dinner at Linda's place. In my past life, Ken had the driver take me home, and my adoptive parents warmly invited him to stay for dinner. Then, just like a typical drama scene, that one dinner made the young man, who grew up in a cold, wealthy home, feel the warmth of family love in our humble household. Those eternally simple smiles on the faces of the poor parents. A small, shabby room full of life's little comforts. All of it made Ken yearn for it more, and like the modest girl from such a family even more. At that moment, though their food might have been sparse, Ken and Linda were probably quite happy. I slowly put on my Hermes robe, washed my face with Chanel cleanser, and ate a bowl of rock sugar bird's nest brought by the maid, showing a cold smirk. No one knew that Linda's parents were indeed poor, but not simple. The couple preferred sons over daughters, originally wanting to adopt a boy. But since there were no non-handicapped boys available at the orphanage, they settled for a pretty daughter, hoping to attract a wealthy son-in-law someday. Seeing Ken bring their daughter home made their blood boil. So they immediately captured this potential rich guy and treated him well. The so-called family love and coziness was just an act. After all, to touch the heart of a rich family's heir, that's the only thing they could showcase. In the past, when I told them I didn't want to marry Ken, my adoptive mom locked me up, and my adoptive dad beat me half to death with a table leg and belt. Linda thought she had landed in paradise this time, not knowing there's no real paradise on earth. Ken's family was a rich hell, and Linda's was a poor hell. Whoever manages to crawl out of it alive depends on their own wit. In the days that followed, Ken's malicious intent grew stronger. The lunch the maid packed for me would be full of thumbtacks when I opened the box. My facial cleanser and toothpaste would squirt out dead spiders. Skirts in my closet were burned full of holes with cigarette butts. And every time I jumped in shock and looked up, I'd meet Ken's mischievous grin. He mouthed at me, "Lillian, you deserve this." Ken thought I'd cry, but I calmly cleared out the thumbtacks, tossed away the spiders, and neatly folded the ruined skirts. Then, Ken's smile vanished. He glared at me, almost gritting his teeth, saying, "Let's see how long you can keep up this act." Luckily this time around, even though I had to endure Ken's malice, all the family resources were focused on me. I no longer spent my days studying, and my nights being forced to work for my adoptive mom. On the contrary, I had a maid to take care of me, a driver to drop me off and pick me up. I only needed to focus on my studies. In my past life, to buy extra study materials, I had to save up for ages and keep an eye out in case my adoptive dad would take my money to buy himself drinks or gamble. But now, my closet was full of branded clothes. My jewelry box held Van Cleef & Arpels and Cartier, casually gifted by Kate and requiring no personal spending from me. On top of that, at the start of each month, I got a cash allowance of $5,000 and a credit card with a $10,000 limit, which would be refilled simply by informing the housekeeper. And the tough times I once endured were all Linda's problem now. I saw her sleeping through classes, because she had to work for her adoptive mom at night and couldn't get enough rest. Her homework gradually remained undone, and she turned in empty test papers. In the past life, I relied on black coffee to keep going, stabbing myself with a compass when I was too sleepy, doing everything to study hard. But having enjoyed the pampered life of a rich girl, Linda lacked the grit and determination. Besides, she didn't care about her studies. To her, being Ken's fiancé was way more valuable than attending a prestigious university. So Linda put all her effort into making Ken like her even more. She skipped math class to secretly write a journal for Ken. During dance rehearsals, she'd sneak out to go stargazing with Ken in the countryside. Eventually, just before the dance performance, she was sitting outside the practice room crying. I bet Linda studied how to cry like a drama heroine, looking up at a 45-degree angle, tears glistening in her eyes, but stubbornly refusing to fall. As a result, Ken saw her as he passed by. When Ken asked her what was wrong, Linda's tears, which she had been holding back, finally started falling. She threw herself into Ken's arms and began to cry. "Ken, I've lost my chance to be on stage. Every girl in the class is going up except me. Lillian just won't let me." Ken, who already couldn't stand Lillian, got angry just hearing this. "Why?" Linda bit her lip, trying hard to stop crying, but couldn't hold back the sobs. She said, "My mom's just a cleaner and my dad's a security guard. I can't even afford a costume, so I don't deserve to be on stage." Ken's expression grew darker. Looking at the sobbing Linda, he said softly, "It's just a costume, right? I'll buy it for you." Linda shook her head, standing firm. "No, one costume costs $800. I can't accept such an expensive gift from you." Ken was both angry and heartbroken. "How dare Lillian?" he blurted out. Linda shook her head tearfully. "She's your sister after all, the princess of your family. Your family donated several school buildings, and your dad is the chairman of the school. Even if the teachers know she's bullying, what can they do?" Linda didn't notice that a reporter, who was at the school for an interview, was passing by behind her. Smelling a story like a shark smells blood, the reporter craned their neck and asked keenly, "Bullying? What bullying?" That's how everything suddenly blew up. In the school's biggest conference room, a large crowd gathered. The principal, vice principal, dean, teachers, and reporters from various media outlets were there. Ken and Linda's parents were all present. Linda's parents were standing protectively, with tear-streaked Linda in one corner of the room, looking both wronged and angry. Matt and Kate originally didn't want to come when they got the call that it was about me. But when they heard even the newly appointed Education Bureau chief showed up, they hurried over. New York High is the best high school in the city, a model for the Education Bureau. Matt clearly knew the bureau chief from before. They went straight to him as soon as they arrived, trying to smooth things over. A little issue like this even concerns the bureau chief. It's just kids having conflicts. But the bureau chief was upright and uncompromising. "Matt, bullying is never a small issue. I know Lillian is your daughter, but to me, every child here is a student and a young tree. I can't watch them grow crooked." With the conversation turning serious, Matt had no choice but to smile and say, yes, we're unclear what happened. Please investigate thoroughly." Back beside Kate, they exchanged a silent glance. I understood. If I was indeed marked as a bully, the family would drop me like a hot potato. A foster daughter they have little emotional connection to. Matt and Kate's stance was clear, as was Ken's. He stood by Linda, who was still crying, and comforted her softly. From time to time, he glanced at me with cold black eyes. Seeing that everyone was present, the principal asked Linda, "Linda, can you tell us what happened?" Linda lifted her swollen, tear-streaked eyes, and softly repeated what she'd told Ken. The reporters were already filled with righteous indignation. One of them said first, From our preliminary investigation, Lillian and Linda were friends at the same orphanage before. They even called each other sisters for a time. Later, Lillian got adopted by Matt's group, while Linda's adoptive parents were just ordinary school staff. Lillian, does entering a wealthy family mean you can bully your former friends and take away opportunities that were originally theirs? Silence filled the room. The reporters' eyes were glued to me, cameras flashing non-stop. Everyone was hungry for a scoop. After all, it was a socially sensitive topic. If children from wealthy families keep seizing educational resources meant for underprivileged kids, robbing them of opportunities to advance, it would surely cause public outrage. Let alone the main characters in this new story were me and Linda, serving as a stark comparison. In the quiet office, I suddenly let out a chuckle, the sound abrupt. The reporters exchanged puzzled looks. Hey, Mr. Reporter, the books I've read say that journalists are supposed to cross-check and fact-check their information. What? Just rushing for a juicy headline means skipping steps now. Instantly, the reporter's face turned red. I stood up and coldly pointed at Linda. The only source of information is her. Everything's just her side of the story. I watched Linda, pale from crying. I truly saw you as a sister once, but in a past life, you killed me out of envy. This life, you're stepping on me to climb up through deceit. If I end up destroying you, it's really your fault. Since the reporters had asked me, I shared what I knew. Linda is jealous of me. She thinks that we started as equals, and she was even prettier and smarter. So why do I have a better life now? Out of jealousy, she's framed me. Hearing this, Ken immediately retorted. But he wanted to say that Linda had actively chosen a poor family, so she couldn't possibly resent or be envious. My words were turning the truth upside down. But before he could finish, the office door slammed open. Standing there was a thin figure with short hair, quiet like an unnoticed weed. Our teacher recognized her. Betty, what are you doing here? In the past life, Betty had already taken her life by this time. But in this life, she survived. Step by step, she walked in and stood next to me. She said quietly, I'm here to testify. She entered so unexpectedly, the reporters were taken aback. Someone asked, are you here to testify against Lillian for bullying Linda? Judging by her attire, Betty clearly wasn't from a wealthy family. At a glance, she seemed more like Linda. Betty looked at the person who asked and shook her head. She said, I'm here to testify for Lillian. I looked at Betty in surprise. Honestly, for today's confrontation, I had prepared a lot, but Betty wasn't among my prepared witnesses. Frankly, we weren't that close. After I gave her money last time, she researched tutoring fees currently on the market, calculated the hours, and refunded me all the extra money. Every day, she gave me an hour of math tutoring. At the exact time, she'd pack her bag and leave, like some pre-programmed robot. In a past life, Betty committed suicide by jumping right before the college entrance exams. Her entire hope was pinned on getting into a good university to quickly start earning and pay for her grandma's medical bills. But a month before the university entrance exams, her dad lost money gambling, drank several bottles of bad liquor, and beat Betty severely. Worse than ever before, Betty's right hand was broken. It was her writing hand. Nobody knew what Betty's dad did that day, or what Betty had gone through with all those bruises. When people found her again, the forever silent girl had already jumped from the rooftop. In this life, even though Betty and I never became friends, I still wanted to save her. So, I spent some money to hire a couple of thugs to beat Betty's dad and put him in the hospital. This way, at least until college entrance exams were over, the man wouldn't be able to abuse her. To plan this carefully, I skipped a night study session for the first time ever. When I got back, Betty, who was in charge of attendance, caught me red-handed. She asked why I skipped. I scratched my head, desperately thinking of an excuse. I looked perfectly fine, not sick or anything, so I couldn't exactly say I skipped to get your dad beaten up. Just then, a teacher from the reception called Betty. Betty, you have a phone call. It was about her dad's incident. 5 minutes later, Betty came back, her face still expressionless. She picked up the attendance sheet, then put it down again. I won't count it this time, she calmly said. Don't skip next time. I let out a sigh of relief and hurried back to my seat to study. Later, while I was testifying for Lillian, Betty calmly said a few words in the same even tone. Only then did I realize she might have known something all along. In front of everyone's anticipating eyes, Betty pulled out a stack of forms and placed them on the table. Linda's face went white like a sheet. According to the school rules, you had to fill out a form to use the dance studio, indicating time and users, but no one really checked. So people just told the dance teacher and went in. Nobody expected Betty to meticulously fill out a form every time and keep them all. Everyone could clearly see under the scrutiny of 30-some forms that Linda's name only appeared twice among the users each time, meaning, out of over 30 practices, she only attended 2. Seeing everyone reading the forms, Betty finally spoke. Linda said Lillian mocked her for not being able to afford a costume, which is why she didn't get to perform. But when I told Lillian I couldn't afford a costume and wanted to quit, she asked me to keep practicing. The next day, I found out she bought costumes for everyone. Betty continued. Linda also claimed Lillian bullied her, because her dad was the janitor, and her mom did cleaning. But my dad doesn't even have a proper job, and our family depends on my grandma's welfare. She eyed me. If you bully poor people, why not bully me too? Her brutally honest confession stunned everyone. In the silence, I sighed, pulled out my phone, and played a video on loudspeaker. The video showed Linda missing the beat, forgetting steps, and clearly out of sync. Yeah, during practices, she was off stargazing with Ken. Linda wasn't that keen on participating in the performance. It was just when I dropped her, she twisted the story to Ken to make herself look pitiful, making him like her more and dislike me. She didn't expect the fuss to get so big, with solid proof against her. I shouldn't have decided to replace Linda without proper consensus. But this performance offered extra points for special talents, and 2 girls in our group were counting on this boost for college admissions. Keeping Linda meant jeopardizing their futures, so I made the call. After the confrontation, opinions about me and Linda flipped. My classmates called her paranoid and started avoiding her. Better not get too close to Linda. She might accuse you of bullying her over her financial status. Honestly, her family's not that poor, right? Both parents have decent jobs. Got students with loans much worse off who never cried about being bullied. Some folks just like blaming fate for their lack of effort. Surprisingly, Linda stayed quiet through it all. She remained calm during the final review period until the exams were over. Watch out, Betty warned. She's probably brewing some sort of comeback. I just smiled. It's fine. If she can keep calm, so can I. I could sense Linda scheming behind the scenes. At home, Ken's attitude towards me visibly worsened. He used to at least bully me when Matt and Kate weren't around. Now, he slammed a bowl of chicken soup onto the table, splashing hot broth onto my face right in front of them. The housekeeper gasped and quickly brought me ice and burn ointment. Kate kept sipping her soup, acting like she saw nothing. Matt looked up slightly, telling Ken to be more careful, lest people think they raised him poorly. Matt and Kate pretty much ignored me. To them, I was just an emotionless foster child. A good luck charm, as decreed by some fortune teller. Linda, in the past, tried bonding with Matt and Kate, but it was pointless. Busy with their lives, they pawned off their own son on the housekeeper, much less concerned themselves with me. In a wealthy family, emotions mean nothing. Only interests matter. I put down the ice and calmly announced, Dad, Mom, I have news. I scored 718 on the college entrance exam, the top science score. At my words, both Matt and Kate looked up sharply, even Ken stared wide-eyed. I slowly picked a bite of sauteed mustard greens, savored it, met their surprised gaze, and casually said, You always said education was our own affair. So I didn't bother updating you. But my teacher called, mentioned journalists wanting to interview you about parenting. Thought I'd ask if you're interested. Back then, despite my hardships, I consistently kept good grades. Without distractions in this life, my scores soared. Matt and Kate exchanged glances. Until now, they didn't care about these exams. Ken had his spot secured in Australia, no exams needed. I was left to my own devices. No one expected I'd do so well. I want to attend Harvard. I looked squarely at Matt. And in turn with your company's investing department starting my freshman year. Matt paused, then smiled. If that's your goal, it's admirable. Congratulations, Lillian. Butler, bring the wine from my trunk. Isn't Lillian 18? Let's celebrate. Ignoring Ken's brewing rage, I toasted with Matt and Kate, expressing my gratitude for their support. I bet correctly. Matt and Kate don't really care about an ordinary adopted daughter. But what if the daughter is top of her class? Then she's the pride of the family, a testament to parental success, the hope for the future. Matt and Kate were so thrilled that they opened a few bottles of their finest wine, set up a press interview, and then went to bed a little tipsy. At the dinner table, it was just me and Ken. The light from the chandelier cast shadows on Ken's face. He had inherited Kate's looks, with a sharp nose and deep-set eyes, a charming and rebellious air. Yet at that moment, he looked at me with cold eyes. Lillian, you don't think this makes you part of the family, do you? I stood up politely, pushed my chair back in place, then whispered close to Ken's ear. Ken, let's get things straight. It's your parents who want me to be part of the family. When I went back to school to pick up my report card, I saw Linda. She stood in the shadow, looking at me with jealousy, confusion, and anger. I knew she must have seen the video of Matt, Kate, and me being interviewed. In it, Kate had her arm around me, and Matt was chatting with the host. The host kept praising him as a successful businessman and educator. At the end, we took a family photo, looking like a picture-perfect family from an ad. This was something Linda never got in a past life. She looked at me bitterly and said, "What tricks did you use?" I shrugged. "Study hard, would you believe it?" Then I turned and walked away. There's no way Linda would believe that, but it's ironically the only solution. I heard Linda quietly say, "Even if you get Matt and Kate's affection, it won't matter. Ken loves me." Classic soap opera protagonist roles always fight to be together, even against their parents or the world. I wished her luck. 10 minutes later, I met the leading man himself. Ken, with his entourage, cornered me in the hallway. By then, teachers and students had left, and the building was empty. Even if I called for help, no one would hear. Glancing up, a chill ran through me. The surveillance cameras had been tampered with. They came prepared. Ken stood in front of me and said, "Lillian, it's time to wake up from your dream of marrying into wealth. Today, I'll show you what happens to a hypocrite." Before he finished, one of his guys grabbed my hair and slammed me into the wall. Dust fell with a crash. Dizzy with pain, I somehow mustered the strength to kick the guy in the groin. A scream followed as he crumbled, face contorted in agony. Ken's expression changed. Just as he was about to call in the others, I pulled a wine bottle from my bag. It was a gift from Matt for sharing with friends at a dinner party. I smashed it against the wall. Red liquid and shards flew everywhere. Holding the jagged edge, I pointed it at the group of guys. "Come on," I shouted. My hair was a mess. Dirt from the wall smeared over me. Warm liquid dripped from my nose down my chin. Probably blood. I didn't know how crazy I looked, but clearly, the sight unnerved them. No one dared to advance. I wiped the blood with my hand and chuckled. "Hypocrite. Ken, you're something else." "Sure, I'm a hypocrite, and you're righteous. At least I donated money and saved lives. How about you? Who have you helped?" "Ah, don't tell me it's only your beloved Linda." Far off, Linda bit her lip and moved aside. She didn't need to hide. I had already seen her. Here for a front row seat as Ken stood up for her. No surprise. Blood kept dripping, impossible to clean, so I disregarded it. Looking at Ken and his crew, I calmly grinned. "Ken, you brought such a big group to make such a scene. You best finish it today. Otherwise," my smile vanished, "if you let me walk away, I'll take you down with me." Ken went pale. As Linda had mentioned before, Matt's the school director. Wealthy and powerful, Ken bullied others. As long as nothing serious happened, the teachers turned a blind eye. But murder in school, Ken didn't have the guts. He glared at me for a long time before whispering, "You scheming girl, death would be too easy for you." I laughed hard. Is this scheming? Want to see some real scheming? A jolt of excitement shot through me. Finally, I could tell him. One syllable at a time, I said. I brought in the reporter investigating the bullying case. In an instant, Ken and Linda's eyes widened. "You thought it was a coincidence that a casual mention of bullying caught the attention of a visiting reporter." I pointed at myself and smirked, because the reporter was my doing. I sent anonymous letters to a bunch of newspapers, claiming serious bullying was happening. If true, it was headline news, so they definitely sent people to check it out. No doubt that with Linda's head on straight as always, when I dismissed her from the dance performance, she would have run to you, claiming I bullied her. Meanwhile, reporters were secretly investigating. Perfect timing, right? They'd certainly check me. But, trust me, I had my bases covered, proving my innocence in the end. Now, Ken, think, when reporters found it wasn't me, would they stop there or dig deeper? Ken went ghostly white. I chuckled. See, it was all set up by me. Just 2 of those 7 or 8 reporters could keep you very busy. You must have heard what the education director said. He despises bullying. If what you did gets out, not even Dad can save you. See, Ken, that's real scheming. I finished, smiling as Ken's face turned grim, while his cronies started to panic. What do we do, Ken? What if the reporters are still here? If they catch wind of this, we're screwed. If this gets on record, it's for life. These guys, mostly from regular families, only followed Ken's lead because they thought he was untouchable. But that day, the press in the conference room were fierce enough to scare off anyone. I almost ruined my reputation, and I'm supposedly Matt's daughter. Can't imagine how others felt. I was in charge of the whole thing. I was looking into fake bullying, while Ken was there as the real bully. So, dear brother, you better take care of me, love me, and support my work at the company. I got close to Ken, smiling sweetly. If not, I'm bringing the whole company down with me. The smile disappeared. I tapped Ken's neck with a broken wine bottle and walked away. Nobody stopped me. Only Linda's choked voice followed me. Ken, how can you just let her leave like that? Ken replied, icy and agitated, get lost. Ken seemed to have straightened up suddenly. In the past, he never let me attend any family events. But this time, when someone invited him to a dinner, he told Kate, I'll take Lillian with me. Mom, please get her address. Over the phone, I overheard Linda arguing with him. If you take a date, shouldn't it be me? Ken sounded impatient. I'm already paying for you to study in Australia. What more do you want? Linda didn't do well on her college entrance exams. In her past life, she wasn't good at studying, focusing only on pleasing Ken. This life got harder and her grades got worse. Her only way out was sticking to Ken, going with him. But I could tell Ken was getting annoyed. Linda initially won Ken over with her stubborn independence despite poverty. That wasn't her true character. People can fake it for a while, but not forever. Ken liked the tough girl saying no to luxury gifts, not the one begging to study in Australia. But Linda couldn't fake it anymore. If Ken didn't take her, she'd be trapped in that suffocating house. After summer, Linda went to Australia with Ken. Ken never officially said Linda was his girlfriend, but Linda's parents couldn't wait. They hired paparazzi to follow Ken and Linda, snapping photos and posting online. Heir of the group shares intimate meal with childhood sweetheart. Seeing the report, Matt smashed his phone. Cheap tricks. Still in college, and trying to force their way into our family. When Ken got home, Matt ranted at him. If you're gonna marry, wait for your mom and me to find someone for you. It's okay to casually date, but don't pick someone so obviously low class. Ken listened quietly, glancing silently at me. I felt his gaze, but kept looking at financial reports. Linda's parents were like this in the past life too. Once Ken showed me any interest, they almost went so far as to drug me and throw me into Ken's bed. As for Matt and Kate, they fiercely opposed Ken marrying their daughter back then. Unfortunately, they didn't live long enough to see Ken marry. After Matt's rant, he forbade Ken from seeing Linda during breaks. Ken didn't resist. He stayed home, acting kindly towards me, gifting expensive diamond earrings for my birthday. When I stayed out late with friends, he waited outside the bar to drive me home. Betty, sitting next to me with a non-alcoholic mojito, looked at Ken smoking outside. She started to say something, but I stopped her. I know what you're gonna say. Don't worry, I'm aware. After saying goodbye to friends, I sat in Ken's car. He handed me a bag. Inside was hangover soup and my favorite cake. I smiled. Ken, it's not necessary. He pressed the gas pedal in silence. The drive was quiet. At home, I tossed the soup and cake in the trash. Ken stood by, silent. I went to my room, not caring about him. During college, Betty developed a program to improve business management efficiency. It was a great chance to start something independently. I'd interned in the group's strategic investment department for nearly 3 years, gaining some influence. I decided to use $2 million to co-found a company with Betty. She'd handle tech. I'd take care of business. There was a lot to do. Ken wasn't as important in comparison. I didn't expect that Linda would see Ken dropping me off. Desperate after not seeing Ken for so long, she waited near the mansion for a glimpse. Instead, she saw me getting out of Ken's car. I could imagine the fear in Linda's heart at that moment. She probably recalled scenes from the past, Ken coldly kicking her out, but tenderly putting a wedding dress on me. Her worst nightmare. Monday morning, after meeting a potential client, I was leaving their building with some materials. At the exit, I saw a familiar figure. Linda was thinner now, her cheeks hollow, eyes bloodshot. Even so, she was still beautiful with her petite face and Barbie-like eyes, like a supermodel. At the orphanage, Linda was the prettiest among all the kids. Every family wanted her first during adoptions, if only she wasn't so proud. Maybe that's why she's so unwilling to accept it. She approached me, stopping in front of me, wearing heels slightly taller than my business flats. Linda said, I'm pregnant, it's Ken's. I replied, is that so? Then those heels might not be the best choice. Linda stared at me, trying to find any sign of emotion. She found none. So, she broke down first. Lillian, what tricks are you using? How did you take Ken from me? This life, he should love me. You're supposed to be the one he hates, who he won't leave a dime for. Why have I tried everything you did last time to make him happy? And yet is growing colder to me. What secrets are you hiding? I watched Linda's breakdown, sighed a long sigh. Excuse me, I have another client to see. Linda looked up at me. Lillian, you won't tell me, huh? That's fine. At that moment, I realized something. but it was too late. Linda lunged, hugging me tightly, then leaned back. We both tumbled down the stairs. With a loud crash, Linda and I tumbled down to the bottom of the stairs. My head must have hit the railing cause everything went dark. My knee screamed in pain, and I couldn't even tell which leg I could move. In the chaos, all I could hear was Linda sobbing and calling out, "Ken." Struggling, I looked up and saw someone standing in front of me. It was Ken. Blood was spreading from under Linda's dress. She cried, "Ken, we lost our baby." She pointed at me, saying Linda had pushed me because she feared the child would take her inheritance. Ken's face turned ashen. After a long pause, he bent down and picked me up. Linda's eyes widened in disbelief. She looked at Ken with anguish, sobbing, "Ken." Ken said coldly, "Linda, you disgust me." Linda started shaking. This was her nightmare. In a past life, Ken often said that to her, "Linda, you disgust me." In this life, she chose differently. But why was the ending the same? Linda seemed to go mad, screaming, "Why? I made the right choice. Why is it the same no matter what I choose?" I couldn't hear what she said after that. The dizziness in my head grew stronger, and the world went black. The faint smell of disinfectant filled the hospital room. Opening my eyes, I saw Ken sitting by my bed. He spoke softly. "Linda asked me to come. She was planning to frame you, but I got there early and heard everything." He continued, "Lillian, just focus on getting better. You don't need to worry about anything else." As for Linda's child, she had drugged my juice. My leg and head still hurt, but I cut Ken off. "Are you explaining something to me?" Ken was momentarily stunned. I pulled up my blanket. "If Dad and Mom ask you about it, you'll explain to them. But as far as I'm concerned, it has nothing to do with me, right?" Ken paused for a long moment before quietly saying, "I want to break up with her." An awkward silence followed. I chuckled softly. "That seems even less my concern." Ken looked at me, his eyes pleading, "Lillian, do you really not get what I mean?" I looked silently into his eyes, seeing his expectant gaze. As it reached its peak, I burst out laughing. "Oh, I get it. Ken, you're the best at being pathetic in the entire world." Ken's eyes dimmed instantly. He sat quietly for a long time before saying softly, "I know I've made many mistakes, but I'm willing to spend the rest of my life trying to get your forgiveness. When you first came to my family, I really disliked you, but then, for some reason, I couldn't help but care more and more for you. When you threatened to drag the entire corporation into hell in the school hallway, I wasn't angry. Instead, I realized you were completely different from what I imagined. Strong, brave, full of life. You're exactly the kind of person I admire." After softly confessing, Ken lowered his head, mumbling, "Lately, I've been having dreams of marrying you. In them, I hold your hand and say, what's mine is yours. Lillian, we could be so happy." I smiled, Ken, we could be happy. Tell you what, go drink the toilet water, and I'll consider it, okay?" Ken left, saying he knew I couldn't forgive him right away, but was willing to wait. After he left the room, Betty, who'd been waiting outside, came in. I looked at her. "Did you hear everything?" "Yeah, I did. So, what do you want to say to me?" I asked. I wanted to ask if that client this morning was more than 50% likely to sign. And when can we finalize the contract? "You heartless thing. Shouldn't you at least ask when I'm getting out of here?" "Already asked the doctor outside. They said the day after tomorrow." I've adjusted the work schedule accordingly, and our next presentation is tentatively set for the day after that. Not gonna let me rest a few more days. Nope, I know what really matters to you. That's why you're my partner. I was quite satisfied. With such a great business partner, how could I not succeed beyond my wildest dreams? After the presentation, I took a day to visit Linda in the hospital. She lost the baby, lying weak and skinny in her bed. Ken already broke up with her. During her hospital stay, her parents hadn't visited even once. The only unexpected visitors were the orphanage director and some fellow orphans. It was Lillian who covered our travel costs. She's been donating money to us over the years. Because of her, many other orphans got better, the director said. Linda looked stunned. Most kids at the orphanage seldom find adopters. They've been abandoned due to disabilities, mental challenges, or terminal illnesses. Compared to them, Linda and I were healthy and attractive, lucky among the lucky. The director always said we were one big family. All the kids were siblings. But after leaving, Linda never thought about her siblings again, whereas I often returned. In the past life, I returned to volunteer frequently, and in this life, after being adopted by Matt, I started donating generously, helping disabled kids access treatments and opportunities. Watching the kids stammer and talk about Sister Lillian, tears welled up in Linda's eyes. She cried for a long time. As the director and kids were saying their goodbyes and I showed up beside her, she hadn't even noticed. I patiently waited for her to finish crying. Eventually, Linda covered her face, speaking softly, "Do you hate me?" But before I could answer, she said, "I hate you too. I just wanted a better life. What did I do wrong?" I thought for a moment, nothing wrong. Just used the wrong methods. Linda looked at me. "Are you saying I'm not as kind, innocent, or caring as you?" I shook my head. "No, Linda, your biggest mistake is always wanting to eat someone else's cake, regardless of past or present lives. But why should someone give you their cake? And if they do, how do you know it's not poisoned? The right thing to do is bake your own cake." Linda wailed, "How dare you judge me? Don't you want Ken's family's fortune?" I shook my head. "I don't want it." The $200,000 from Ken's family was already reimbursed, principal and interest, after Betty and I's company started making a profit. As for the clothes and jewelry Kate gave me, the valuable ones are locked up with a list. I hope to cut ties with them completely in the future. The reason is simple. Matt made his fortune in real estate. Over the past 30 years, in the process of snapping up land and constructing buildings, a lot has happened, even lives lost. Who knows how many shady deals he's done. Matt has his ways to keep these things under wraps for now, but he can't hide it forever. Money tainted with blood and dirt is bound to cause trouble sooner or later, and when that happens, everyone related to the group will end up in jail. Linda couldn't grasp this. She just stared at me blankly. After a while, she said softly, "In 2 lifetimes, I've lost to you." I shook my head gently, then leaned in close to her. "That's why I came. I had something to say to Linda. Linda, in 2 lifetimes, you've been after me like I'm your biggest enemy. But I ask you, in these 2 lives, was it really me who made your life miserable?" It was like a bolt of lightning struck Linda. She trembled all over, broke down, and cried. I turned and left, never looking back. Time flies. When the company Betty and I founded went public, I saw the news. At the entrance of the group building, Linda stabbed Ken with a knife. Betty was next to me and saw the news too. In the news, Linda had been arrested by the police, and Ken was being rushed to the hospital, his life hanging in the balance. Betty glanced at it and then looked away. I teased her. "Aren't you going to ask me if I'm worried about Ken?" She said, "You're not worried, but he loved me later, didn't he?" Betty showed no expression and replied, "Lillian, in this life, I'd rather you take loan shark money than accept the love of a rotten person. Also, let me take another look at the media release for later. I think there are 6 places where you broke the sentence wrong." "Okay, Betty." The world's largest industry summit is about to begin, and under the lights, the host has already started with the exciting opening remarks. As the youngest and most prominent successful female entrepreneurs, Betty and I are about to take the stage. Countless flashbulbs are about to light up for us. Countless cameras are about to focus on us. Betty is wearing a snow-white suit, cool and capable, stand out and distinguished. The weed that grew quietly in her adolescence finally became a pine tree standing in the blizzard. And I, in a black silk gown, warm and graceful with hidden luster. After enduring the long dark night, we finally see the starlight. "Betty, are you nervous?" "Forget it. AI doesn't get nervous. What am I even asking?" Silence. After a while, Betty took my hand, passing warmth to my palm. "Lillian, don't be nervous." The curtain lifted. Our names appeared on the giant LED screen. Betty and I walked hand in hand towards the stage, greeted by a wave of applause like a tsunami. Epilogue. Later on, the company Betty and I built kept growing. Ken didn't die. He was seriously injured, but after emergency care, he survived. Probably for the best. Someone from his family's group needs to be alive to pay for their sins. Linda went to prison. She wrote to me from there, saying if she could ever get out, she'd want to return to the orphanage and volunteer to care for the kids. She said she hoped to spend the rest of her life making amends to me. At the end of the letter, she called me sister. My feelings were mixed, so I put those letters away. Many kids from the orphanage gathered around me. "Sister Lillian, what are you looking at?" I shook my head. "Nothing." Today, Betty and I came to the orphanage and met with the director. We're setting up a charity fund in the company's name to help kids who aren't adopted and continually support those who are but encounter difficulties after. The sun shines bright, and the weather is good. We've finally stepped into the future we've anticipated. Epilogue. Betty always felt she had no friends. In this school, the pretty ones hang with the pretty ones, and the rich with the rich. Betty wasn't pretty. She wasn't wealthy, and her personality was peculiar. She knew nobody would like someone like her, so she lived quietly, until a little girl kept seeking her out. "Betty, why are you wearing long sleeves on such a hot day?" "Betty, you've got talent in dance. Why don't you perform when the dance teacher asks you to?" So annoying. These silly questions didn't have any answers she could give. Betty stayed silent. Her silence was taken as indifference by the little girl, who left dejectedly, but came back hours later. "Betty, can you teach me about conic sections? I'll treat you to spicy sticks. Actually, this little girl didn't have a good family situation either. Her dad was probably the school security guard, and her mom a cleaner. Compared to her, Betty's family was somewhat better, but just barely. At least she had a grandma who loved her. The little girl's parents didn't care much for her. But unlike Betty, the little girl was likable. Everyone in the class liked her. And even a rich kid from the next class was said to fiercely pursue her. Betty occasionally felt a twinge of curiosity. That rich kid, Ken, I hear he likes you. The little girl bit her pen while solving a math problem. I don't want love from a rotten person. Actually, they didn't spend much time together, but the little girl seemed to figure out Betty's family situation. Betty, take this money. It took the little girl a long time to save up for teaching aids. Who knows where she saved this money from? Betty wouldn't accept it. She was poor, but her pride was immense. I didn't do anything. I can't take your money. These were actually the only conversations they had. Betty was focused on studying, thinking that as long as she got into college, things would be okay. She was great in academics, hopeful about getting into a good university. Even if she didn't do too well, she wouldn't fail too badly. Then she could earn money, buy medicine for her grandma, and hang out with the little girl. She could become her friend. But a month before the college entrance exam, her dad came back with some news. Your grandma can't make it. Betty felt frozen to the bone. Her dad, drunk, muttered to himself, an incurable disease, costing money endlessly. The doctor said there's only a 30% chance with surgery. I said forget it. Let her die in the hospital hallway, he sneered. Old hag, always a burden. Betty's ears buzzed with chaos. She dug out the last bit of money from her backpack, originally saved for her college tuition. She rushed to the hospital to save grandma, but was stopped by her dad. Bitch, you've got money. Why didn't you give it to me when I was beaten by creditors yesterday? Betty struggled ferociously, but she was too skinny, with limbs like bean sprouts, lacking strength. Her dad snatched the money and gave her the worst beating. Even if I kill you today, you deserve it. Betty lost consciousness. When she woke up, her dad had already left with the money to drink. She rushed frantically to the hospital. The familiar doctor regretfully shook his head at her. Grandma was gone. What happened to your hand? The doctor noticed Betty's arm. Betty looked at her arm, bent at a bizarre angle. Even a layman could tell it was broken. She declined the doctor's offer to take an X-ray and stumbled home. On the way, a girl blocked her path. The girl wore gold-rimmed glasses, a white shirt, and seemed bookish, about her age. Do you want a do-over? The girl seemed to be saying something, but Betty couldn't hear her clearly. Finally, the girl shoved a note with a string of numbers to her. If you want a do-over, write your name, birth date, and address in a text, and send it to this number. I can give you another chance. Betty sat on the rooftop. She thought about what the girl said. Start over. What would starting over even change? In this life, she really tried her hardest. Would starting again lead to a better outcome? Better give this chance to someone who needs it more. So, Betty took out her phone. She was Betty, and her profile had info about everyone in her class. She found the girl's details. The rumor was that the girl was punished and beaten by her parents for refusing to date some rich guy. Poor girl. Let her have the second chance. She's strong and would probably live a better life with it. Betty picked up her phone. Her right hand was broken, so she clumsily typed in the girl's information with her left hand. Message sent. Betty took a deep breath. Surrounded by overwhelming despair, with a small dose of hope, she jumped. She thought it didn't matter if Lillian didn't remember, because their promise had been fulfilled. They really stood in the future they once hoped for. Betty woke up. She remembered jumping, but here she was, in bed. Her mind was full of confusing shadows, unclear if they were dreams or forgotten experiences. Probably not real, right? After all, someone as ordinary as her wouldn't get a do-over like those novel heroines do. So, it was probably just a dream. The alarm rang, and Betty got up for school. Today, something big happened. A rich girl transferred to their class. Betty vaguely recalled dreaming about this scene. In the dream, this rich girl was bullied in the bathroom. Betty had stepped in, offering a towel and encouraged her to speak up, only to be rejected with, "Speak up, that's my brother." So, this time, Betty decided not to interfere. She just handed the towel and walked away. But then, the rich girl, Lillian, called out, "Betty." Betty stopped in her tracks. For a moment, she felt like she'd heard this voice many times in her dreams. Lillian seemed really friendly. She took Betty out for a meal and asked her to be her tutor. After a couple of lessons, Betty realized that Lillian knew conic sections better than she did. Lillian was just trying to find a way to give her money while preserving Betty's dignity. Betty had never cried in her life, but at that moment, her nose got a little stingy. With Lillian's help, Betty managed to not only cover her living expenses, but also saved some money. She got her grandma into a good hospital for surgery, and it went well. As for her dad, he mysteriously ended up in the hospital. Betty tried to hint at Lillian to see if she had anything to do with it. Lillian played dumb but couldn't hide her smile. Betty felt a little speechless. She was quiet, not dumb. Later, Betty's dad was discharged, only to get entangled with a new creditor. His previously broken bone got smashed again, and pierced into his heart. They said there was a small chance he could be saved when found, but Betty signed to voluntarily give up treatment. Betty scattered his ashes in a sewage ditch, hired help to take care of her grandma, and with these worries dealt with, she finally got into Cambridge University. She had lots of things she wanted to do. Like, when Lillian said she wanted to start her own business, Betty hoped to be her partner. Later, the dreams became clearer. Betty remembered. Lillian was the girl from the previous life. She indeed changed her fate this time around. Her decision was worth it. And so, Betty asked Lillian one day, "In the last life, was there anything particularly memorable for you?" Lillian looked a bit puzzled. "Too many things." "Which one do you mean?" Betty said, "It's not really an event, more like a scene." One day, under an unlit sky, two girls in thin school uniforms were out for a morning run. They were the earliest risers and the hardest workers in school. Their long, barren adolescence felt like a never-ending winter night. The short-haired, skinny girl couldn't run any longer and wanted to stop. Then, the long-haired girl ran over, grabbed her hand, and led her towards the faint light ahead. The light grew brighter. The world was about to be illuminated. Would we really have a bright future? Definitely. At this moment, Betty and Lillian stood hand in hand, under the spotlight.